Before I talk about soft factors, I do want to acknowledge that one of the best ways to offset an LSAT score or GPA that's less than desirable is simply to be a splitter. So a splitter is essentially someone who has at least one number, either your LSAT score or GPA, that is at or above the median. So even though the second number isn't at or above the median, the fact that you have that one number at the median or above makes you a splitter. So if you have a low LSAT score, to be a splitter, you would need a high GPA and vice versa. And when I say high, I recognize that that phrase is very relative. I'm using as a measuring stick simply the median score for that school. So if you have the median score for that school with one number but not the other, you are a splitter. Using soft factors, however, some of the ways to offset less than favorable hard factors include recognizing and using to your advantage some of the other numbers that schools care about, as well as mastering your ability to tell your story. So let's go ahead and discuss both a bit more in detail. All right, so with regard to other numbers that matter to schools, unfortunately, one of the first is rankings. The U.S. News and World Report rankings, to be specific. So to be clear, I do not want you to think that admissions officers themselves are obsessed with rankings, because in all honesty, they really are not. I know that my colleagues and my boss at the law school that I worked at probably would have preferred it if U.S. News and World Report rankings did not exist. That way, no school, including us, would be as numbers oriented as we sometimes are. However, the reality is these rankings do exist. And for people outside of law school admissions offices, folks higher up on the food chain, whether that is chancellors, board of trustees, whatever, they are things that are really valued. And so the people that answer to these higher ups, we have to kind of take it into consideration as well. So anywho, the good news is that even though rankings are something that schools care about, if you are a splitter, again, that's the best way to offset a low number, because having at least one number in the median helps an admissions officer make the argument for admitting you without having to convince higher ups that such a decision will jeopardize school rankings. So usually students that I am talking to are already in the process of applying to law school, so your GPA is probably already set. However, if you are an undergraduate student early on in your career, a freshman, a sophomore, know that one of the best things that you can do for yourself right now is to get and maintain and keep a high GPA. By the time you get to your junior and senior year, it's much harder to change your GPA. But early on, if you are able to be as close to a 4.0 as possible, that's going to enhance your chances or likelihood of having a GPA that's at or above a school's median. Historically, minority students do not do as well on the LSAT as their non-minority counterparts, or at least underrepresented minority students. So getting a good LSAT score is also a way to offset a low GPA, but that does require, a bit of commitment, studying, all these other things. I definitely will talk a bit about this later, but if I stress nothing else, I want to stress to all underrepresented minority students, you should not take the LSAT cold turkey ever. But I'll touch on that a bit more. All right. So next, racial diversity is a number that schools care about. So they care about being able to say we have X percent of, Black students or X percent of students of color. So racial diversity is definitely something that schools are becoming increasingly more concerned about. As you may already know, and I talk about this often, the legal profession is not very diverse. Only about 5% of lawyers are Black. Only about 2% of us are Black women. Only about 5% are Latinx, and the numbers really just get more grim and more dismal as you start looking at other racial and ethnic minority stats. So the legal profession is no way a profession that reflects the vast diversity of our nation. And unfortunately, that same lack of diversity is often reflected in law schools. Not surprising, law schools are the pathway to the legal profession, right? But I say that to say that I really want you to take that into consideration and believe me when I say that schools are desperate to increase their number of minority students. So that's why I want you to know about and utilize tools like Law School Predictor to your advantage. Do not make the mistake of assuming that just because your numbers are below medians, that you cannot get into the school of your dreams. Your URM status in and of itself is valuable. URM stands for underrepresented minority. And also, even when schools legally or by policy can't take race into consideration, when considering applicants for admissions, know that there are other factors that you likely have that can weigh in your favor all the same. So factors like being a first-generation college student or being a student from a working class or poor socioeconomic background where your family didn't make over, let's say, $100,000 annually, and where you didn't have a silver spoon in your mouth, or many of the privileges that some of your counterparts applying for law school did have. Those are things that are going to work in your favor, that you come from a different background. Also know this: if you are a STEM major by chance, having a low GPA is somewhat expected. You still want to do well on the LSAT, get at or above the median to help offset that low GPA. But know that STEM majors are kind of in desperate demand right now. That's because of the rapid growth of fields like IP law, which stands for intellectual property law. More folks with science, technology, engineering, and math-based degrees are desperately needed right now. So know that there are instances where your undergraduate degree alone can help make you a hot commodity when it comes to admissions decisions.